All right, board, come to order for me for our pre-meeting, which is the discussion of the Gilead Road project. And we'll give you the floor, Mr. Tuck.
Good evening. Here tonight to give you a little bit of history. Heather's also here to talk a little bit about some adopted plans. And what we're going to talk about is Gilead Road, more specifically Gilead Road between Commerce Center Drive, or where the post office is, and 115, which is just right outside of Town Hall. And as it relates to the DOT STIP project, U5807. So I guess where we're trying to go in the end, why are we doing this? So something to think about. Not looking for a decision, but what to be thinking about is this project something that the town still wants? If yes, that's an okay answer. If no, then I guess then what? So that's what we want you to think about as you're taking in the information. So again, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the project itself, how it got started, where we are today, and then Heather's going to jump in, talk a little bit about adopted plans through the years, and then leave some time at the end for questions. So back in 2006, the project was identified in the 2025 Long Range Transportation Plan, better known today as the MTP, or Metropolitan Transportation Plan. It was identified as a project to be done at a cost of a little over $4 million. Later on, a few years, in 2010, the first iteration of the STIP process the state now uses, P1.0, it was identified as a project to widen Gilead Road to 4 lanes and add bike lanes between US 21 and 115. The budget was re-looked at as part of that and rose to $6 million. So that just means it was a candidate project. So if you're thinking about, as it relates to like the town CIP, it was a maybe project. And then the projects that actually get funded are the ones that make it into the STIP. So 6 years later, when the STIP came out, and for the 2016 to 2025 time frame, it made it in there as a project. It was listed as a multi-lane widening project between 21 and 115 with an initial budget of a little over $6 million and a construction start of 2024. So that was 8 years after the beginning of the STIP. So at that point, the state hadn't started on it. It was a project that they would be starting on, but hadn't yet. So 2 years later, the STIP was updated, as it currently is every 2 years, and the budget was updated a little bit more this time, a little over $15 million, with that same construction year start of 2024. And so with that in mind, as time was ticking and the construction timeline to start was still the same, the state started working on the project. So in 2017, the state staff and their consultant met with some town staff to have a kind of a kickoff meeting, just a project start. Just let us know, hey, we're going to start working on this project. What input do you have? Here's some information that we have, and we're going to get started. And so just a couple of key points that were talked about during that meeting were the town's request for a 30-mile-per-hour posted speed for the section. And also the town asked if the DOT would consider roundabouts at intersections. And to support that, to try to reduce those vehicle speeds. And so shown on the bottom of the screen is the initial kind of typical section that was discussed at the meeting. You got to have somewhere to start with, so this is where it kind of began. And so as you can see in the section, there's 2 lanes in each direction. A narrow median in the middle, kind of wide outside. That outside lane is wider than your typical to accommodate bicycle traffic. And then also sidewalks on both sides of the street. This is, I think, 84, 85 feet in total for that typical section. So a year later, DOT went back, took the input the town had and started working on the project more. One thing they developed was their traffic forecast. Traffic forecasts are key because That's the future year that the state's going to design the project for. You don't design based on today's conditions, because by the time you build it, it'll be out of date. So they look into the future, and the design year that was selected was 2040. And so that's the traffic volumes they're trying to accommodate during peak times in that year. And so the state looked at the roundabouts, and they also looked at traffic signals to see which one could work. Roundabouts were selected as the preferred alternative. However, there's some queuing, a queuing issue from 115 back through a potential roundabout at Sherwood. That popped up as something that came out of the initial traffic analysis. And so what the town did, hearing that, they said, well, what year would that be an issue? Is it going to be an issue later on, closer to 2040? Or is it going to be something that's going to be found early on to see, is it something you kind of wait and maybe look at again at a later time? Or if it's going to be early on, it'd be something that would have to be addressed. And some things changed early on in the project design. And so coming out of that meeting, the town asked the state to look at some additional options. They looked at this and said, this may not be what the town wants. Are there some other ideas that you'd consider? Maybe changing signal phasing at the intersection, maybe not allowing movements during peak times, or different laneage out there to maybe reduce some of those property impacts at the 115 intersection. And what really, was brought out by this initial round of analysis was the 115 intersection was going to be that driver. That's that key intersection in the corridor that's going to drive what kind of happens in that whole area. The other intersections, there's not as much turning traffic, so it's really not going to have a lot of impact on the design. So then, later in the year, state did their analysis, looking at the additional alternatives and ideas the town had, and really found that none of those fixed the issue. So needed to think of something else, maybe. I also found that some of those additional options had some additional impacts. The project would have to get lengthened more along Huntersville Concord Road, potentially some impacts up and down Main Street. And that was back before the Main Street project was let for construction. And so what was shown in the analysis was there may have to be some lanes that are added, removed, sidewalk removed, maybe as part of that project. So that really didn't seem to help the project out with those additional alternatives. So met with the state again early in 2019 and said, what else can you come up with? What else can we do to try to fix this problem? Because what had been discussed to that point really hadn't fixed it. No silver bullets out there so far. And the idea of a quadrant roadway. So if you don't know what a quadrant roadway is, think of 73 at 21, where you have to go to instead of making a left on 21 coming off the interstate, you have to make a couple of rights. That's a quadrant roadway. And so the state said, well, we've had some success there. Could that be a solution here? Could that work? And so they went back, did some analysis, looked at some more options, still didn't work. So we were probably up to 10 options or so looked at to date. That's typically way more than they'll look at, but they were trying to find a solution. Also, the town was looking to sell the property for the North State Development, where a quadrant roadway would go. So that was also another negative, in addition to the traffic analysis not working. So let's go back again. Let's keep trying. Let's see if we can figure this out. So as y'all remember, just about 4 years ago, pandemic came through. There was a bunch of funding challenges with the state, and they pretty much put everything on pause for a little bit. And so the town and the state have been working together to try to figure out a solution. Didn't want to pause that momentum and things we've done so far. So town actually funded looking at a couple of more scenarios and paid for that analysis just to see if we could figure out a solution. The common thing between all of those solutions is that Gilead Road is 4 lanes. That's 2 through lanes in each direction. Really the key and really the things that's being evaluated is the intersection with 115. What could we try to find to figure out what's going to meet the state's minimum level of service and not create major queuing issues in the design year? And so the town did the analysis, and then we met with DOT, and what we found was the level of service D alternative. What's that minimum alternative that meets the state's criteria? That's what the state selected. He said, this is what we need to do, and developed a concept based on that, which I'll show you here in a little bit. And so since then, I'll say not a whole lot's been done. It's just been kind of waiting around for the state to pick back up. The cost estimate's been updated. When it was done in 2022, it had risen to $46 million. So if you remember back to my first slide, initial project estimate, $4 million. You wait, 15 years or so, projects have escalated cost since then. So it's gone up and continues to. Something else that's happened is in 2023, since it had been so long since the state had started the project, they need to update their traffic forecast. Well, when you update the traffic forecast, typically traffic volumes don't go down, they typically go up. So the solutions that have been developed were all based on 2040 analysis. Now there's 2050, so they're worse. So they'll have to go back and rerun the analysis to see if the solution still works. And then earlier this year, we had a brief meeting with DOT just to get an update on where they were. And so what they were looking for is this a project the town still is supportive of, or if not, then that's what they would like to know. Just as a tidbit there, the current STIP, which is being updated for the next round and for the 2026 to 2035 one, but the last STIP that was adopted, the cost had risen to close to $50 million. So again, the longer you wait on a project, the further it's going to get. So what does that concept look like? I mentioned it earlier. What does that concept look like that the state's looking to deliver or looking to tweak and update? Broke it into pieces. It's hard to put it all. If I put it all on the screen, we'd all have magnifying glasses out trying to read it. So I tried to break it up into a few different slides here just so you can see it in a little more detail. So the roundabout there that's shown on the screen, that's at Commerce Center Drive. So think of the post office. That intersection there, that's where this multi-lane roundabout would be. And then as you work to the right on the screen, it shows a multi-lane divided section, 2 through lanes in each direction with a solid median down through the middle. So if you want to turn out from a side street and want to go left, you have to turn right, go down to the roundabout, and then turn around and come back. Next section, again, same thing along the road. The next roundabout would be at Sherwood. So at Huntersville Elementary School, there would be a multi-lane roundabout there. I'll say for the previous section, most of the businesses and homes are kind of set back from Gilead, so there'd be some property impacts there. As you get closer here to 115, there's more building impacts, more properties where buildings would be impacted by this concept. There's a couple on this one, and then as you work your way further to the east, again, this is the challenge. This is the challenge for the project, is the 115 intersection. And so this is the level of service D alternative laneage. As you can see, it's a bunch of lanes, way more than is out there today. Also, there'd be building impacts. Part of the project is on top of the current building we're sitting in, and also the brewery that's on the other side of the street would also be significantly impacted, meaning the project's on top of their building. So I'm going to turn it over to Heather to kind of talk about, that's kind of the history on where the state's project has been so far. And then Heather's going to jump in and talk a little bit about some of the town's approved plans.
Yeah, so I am going to review some of the previous planning studies that have moved forward in lockstep with the STIP project, some of which have informed the traffic analyses and some of which have had recommendations that kind of go against the STIP project. Starting in 2006, there was the Gilead Road US 21 Transportation and Land Use Small Area Plan. This recommended that Gilead Road may be maintained as a 2-lane road. and try to preserve that setback in buildings with the treescape and improve the pedestrian landscape. It also had a somewhat crude layout of the road, and you can see between 77 and Commerce Center Drive, it's showing a widened road and then tapering down to maintain that 2-lane road east of Commerce Center Drive. Moving forward, the downtown master plan, it was actually 2005. This is a typo there. That looked at the traffic analysis of the Gilead Road intersection here at 115 and also 21, and showed it operating at unacceptable levels of service, or in other words, congestion. And this, is right in line with the traffic analyses that were done with the STIP project. At the same time, this plan recommended using a context-sensitive street design and just adding bike lanes within the existing pavement, which has since been done. Fast forward to 2014, there was another downtown transportation system plan. As the slide indicates, this was not adopted, but it evaluated multiple cross sections for the Gilead Road widening, looking at 4-lane sections similar to the final design that Stevens shared, as well as some 5-lane sections and some with bike lanes, some without. In all those evaluations, they were looking at property impacts and impacts to buildings. And as Stephen said, the 4-lane section mostly impacts buildings closer here to downtown. But it was not adopted, and there was no final recommendation for the cross-section out of this study. And then most recently, we adopted the
I'm sorry, when you say not adopted by the board?
Yes, the
Okay,
board
just
did
wanna
not
make sure.
formally adopt it. But in 2023, as you all may well know, we adopted the downtown plan, and I've highlighted some of the key principles that were developed out of this plan to treat the car as a guest on all streets and create an optimal pedestrian environment using a network approach, and create a downtown that has a sense of gathering and encourages the creation of rituals and supports and facilitates and celebrates the walking environment. To that end, there were specific mobility recommendations, and I just want to highlight that the number one was that Gilead Road not be widened and that it be designed as a multimodal street that includes on-street parking. And this was adopted just a year ago. So I wanted to highlight some of the key concerns on how to move forward. The design that Stephen shared with you meets the minimum level of service D, but it's not an improvement over the current level of service or the congestion level of service that was measured back in 2005, again in 2017. In order to meet that minimum standard, it requires widening this intersection. So if you widen the road, the increased traffic requires widening this intersection to make the whole project work. And it's incompatible with the multiple adopted plans that the town has passed in previous years. Summary of issues. It was, the project was developed in order to improve congestion along the corridor and at the intersection, and it does not improve it measurably, but merely meets the minimum standards that's acceptable by the state. The widening project runs counter to the approved and adopted plans, stretching back a couple of decades. However, we've met with NCDOT, and the funding for U5807 cannot be used for anything except for widening. So if we widen the road, in order to accommodate that increased traffic, we have to widen the intersection and impact the buildings. So our question is, how do you want to proceed, I suppose?
Commissioner Dumas, you have a question?
So just,
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, I don't think I have a question at this time, but I've been meeting in the transportation meetings for a while, and I thought that I could give like some of the things that we've had discussions about, just some background. one of the thoughts when this was first presented to me was how we want our downtown to feel more like a downtown, walkable and everything. I personally don't think a 4-lane highway through the downtown area makes any sense for our goals. So, we talked about like, what if we could try to do some connections off of, like, if we had more connections away from Gilead, and there's, there weren't really a ton of options there either, if I remember correctly.
We haven't looked at it a whole lot, but not a lot so far.
Yeah. And then I guess the one question that I came up with when we were looking at that is if we keep the widened part on the other side of Commerce Drive, and then I'm worried about like the congestion effect. We're trying to get rid of the congestion. I'm worried about the congestion effect going down back to the narrower lanes. And I'm wondering, is there any traffic circle design to put there that could potentially help with steering traffic one way or the other that wouldn't make people stop to merge, if that makes sense? So that was a couple thoughts that I had. And I thought I was going to give more background, but I'm blanking at the moment.
Commissioner Bergeson?
Yeah, I did have a question. I can't, and I was trying to pull up the downtown master plan, but it's been a little slow. I thought when that was done that there are some suggestions or recommendations in that plan of ways to help guide traffic around that intersection. Like whether, like a, yes, around like our downtown core in general, to kind of promote more walkability.
Sure.
Keep going. That one.
Yeah, so this does show a enhanced network of area, and there was some light modeling done that did show some potential relief. Again, this was all very high-level modeling. I defer to Stephen. They're ideas. Nothing's been scientifically proven. And again, when it comes to traffic modeling, it's what you get out of it is only as good as what you put into it. So again, this was just concepts to see, is there something we should maybe explore further? And the answer is potentially.
Anybody else?
Based on the previous plan, where you talked about the roundabouts and the specific locations, are you all still looking at that particular, as far as where the placement? And I guess I'm just, because seeing the roundabouts like right by Commerce and then right in front of Sherwood and the school, I'm just concerned there as far as the traffic.
So
So I was just wondering, like, where did that concept come from for the roundabouts being placed in those specific areas?
Sure. So I don't think that and I'm going to try to remember because it's been a little bit. But I don't think they looked at every single intersection being a roundabout. I think they tried to look kind of at the ends because right now the project, again, looking at the concept, so between the post office all the way over to the elementary school, there's no break in the median. And so if you move the roundabout to a different location further to the west, closer to the post office, well then if there's a median in this section, where can people turn or turn around at? And so with the roundabouts being spread out further, a pro would be you turn out and turn right and go pretty far down the road before you get to the roundabout and then have to head back, but you get more area that can go somewhere and turn around. If you move the roundabouts closer together, you're kind of narrowing that area, so then the people outside of that, they're going to have to go maybe different locations to try to turn around. I think those just made sense to the state when they were looking at laying out the corridor to have that. I don't know that they looked at, again, every single intersection. I'm just trying to remember, they may have looked at Hillcrest too to have it, but that's pretty close to where Sherwood is right now. Thank you. Sure.
No? Commissioner Bergeson?
I've got another question. Can you pull up the slide that has the other roundabout, the one by the post office? And I guess one thing I'm wondering, because this is all being talked about and has been looked at as one whole project, but has there ever been conversations about breaking it into two different projects and looking at like the area by the post office as one thing and then the area further down closer to here as a separate?
The state's looked at it as one big project so far. And I'll say the intersection at Commerce Center, as part of the 21 and Gilead project, a traffic signal and turn lanes are going in there as part of that project that's under construction right now.
Okay.
The town has a project to do as soon as the state's done with theirs to add that fourth leg to the intersection and do a little bit of realignment so that you'll have a four-legged intersection that's a traffic signal. And then this project would then come back, as currently scoped, and then put a roundabout at that location.
Okay, so we are getting a traffic light already at the post office?
Traffic signal, yes, at the post office.
Because I know
and
that
then-
section can kind of be problematic. That's where I was going, but if we already have a solution, then.
If I might add, it's important to note that the roundabouts are put in as part of the widening project. It was never considered as just like intersection improvements along the corridor.
So I guess you're looking for us to say yay or nay on moving forward with NCU DOT?
That's where we're trying to end up.
Yeah.
Is
I think that I am a nay. I don't see how this makes financial, like, it doesn't make financial sense, fiscal sense to move forward with that cost of a program. I know it's not our cost, right, because it's there.
Yeah, it's a state project, and let's say the intent of this evening was to present a bunch of information for you to think about, and then, again, throw some options up there to say if it's a yes, we want to keep it as is, then I don't think anything further is needed. The state's going to pick up the project probably later this year and move it forward towards that 2030, 2031 start of construction. If the answer is no, then some additional steps. I've tried to lay out a few of those up here. The town would need to do some public involvement, adopt some resolutions. Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, CRTPO, would need to take some action. State Board of Transportation would need to take some action. So it's not looking for a yes or no tonight, and then it's definitely done either way. There still would need to be some additional steps if it is no. But wanted to present both sides and see, were there additional questions you had about it? We could try to get some answers to you on, and then get you to think about what's going on. Anthony, do you have something?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and Stephen may have mentioned this, but ultimately, if the board decides to go down the path of removing this project, and I think maybe how they hit on this, these funds cannot be used on another town project. I know some of you know that. We've asked that. You can't push it to a different project. Basically, that money goes back into the pot and reprioritized regionally. Those funds are used, so we can't pick up a road to the north, a road to the south, an intersection. I wish it worked that easy, but it doesn't. So ultimately, if you decide this is not the right fit for Huntersville, then ultimately go through that step process of going through the various agencies to basically get it removed, and then ultimately the road would stay like it is. And we may come back to the board and look to see if we could take it over and do some, various things. We have not approached DOT on that yet because it ties into their system, 115 and other pieces, 21 and all that. So would they allow us to take it over? Maybe, but we haven't approached that either. So if we were to take it over and maybe look at some minor things here, there, and yonder, we haven't gone that far to see what we could do. So I'll stop there. Stephen may have some.
Yeah, and say I don't think we've asked him either. Well, if the answer is no to this project, could the town do some other projects to try to improve the corridor and still DOT maintain it? We haven't. I would assume yes. If the town wanted to spend town money to improve the corridor, I would guess they would say yes. But we haven't asked that question either. versus taking it over and then trying to maintain it from there. That can create some other challenges.
Stephen, in the event that we decided we did not want to proceed with the project, obviously there are a number of steps here. So I know you're saying tonight's information, but realistically, you know, because of CRTPO and state and all that, when do you think it's reasonable? When do we need to make a decision by, I guess?
I would think the state's going to look for the town to make a decision here in the next couple of months, because they're going to pick up, as they indicated earlier this year, they were looking to pick up the project later this year and start spending money again and moving forward. And if the town decides that it's not something they want, the sooner the better, then they're not spending money on something that the town doesn't want.
So kind of off of that, but a little bit different. If the board would want to move quickly on it, I mean, how much time does staff need to get something ready for an agenda? Does it?
Quick.
Quick? Okay.
Yeah, it won't take long. I mean, I think if I recall, there's like a resolution that would need to come back to the board for adoption to start that process. So not a lot.
Yeah, unless you needed more information from us.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was anything like legal-wise or anything that would have to go into it that would take time or.
Ultimately, it would be for the state to remove the project. They're probably just looking for a generalized resolution expressing the board's, desire to have them remove it.
I'm going to do a quick little survey here, Stephen. Does the board need any more information or time to think about this? If you're ready to kind of give the nod to proceed with not doing the project, are you ready for that, or do you need more time? Just kind of. Okay, so it looks like the board is ready for us to move on with this next phase of being the first municipality to turn down DOT money and move forward with that, not proceeding with that, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. We'll work on that and bring something back to you at an upcoming meeting.
All right, thank you so much for your time, and the presentation was great. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, we'll take a quick break and reconvene at 6 p.m. for our